Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with reference recordings. And today we're going to be talking about Ravel's Daphnis et Chloé, the most gorgeous, sensual ballet masterpiece that anybody ever wrote. It's Ravel's biggest stage work, and it's just gorgeously, marvelously wonderful. We all love it, right? You can't not love Daphnis and Chloé. In fact, just recently, I was riding around New York with my driver friend, who is a Lyft driver, and it's wonderful because he takes me all over the place, and he's just a good guy, and he's really interested in music, but he doesn't know a lot about it. In fact, his big discovery recently, because I was doing the series, was Alan Pedersen, because I was doing my fabulous concert programs, Pedersen series, and he loves Pedersen. And it just goes to show something I've always known, which is that even composers who are sort of outside the traditional classical music ghetto can be enormously appealing to people who just approach them with open ears and with freshness, and especially in Pedersen's case, people who like, heavy metal or, acid rock or things that are kind of antisocial in content. Yeah, why not? He's the classical music equivalent, and it works just as well. This has nothing to do with Ravel. No, it does. It does, because in between our Pedersen fest, I was actually playing for him the second suite from Daphnis and Chloé, and it just hit him like a ton of bricks. I mean, the sunrise section particularly, which everyone knows is just the most glorious piece of orchestral writing anybody ever did. It's perfect, and he drives at like 4 a.m. when the sun's coming up, and so he wanted it so he could play it for his customers who he's going back and forth with, to the airport at dawn as the sun is rising, and really, it's just amazing, absolutely amazing. I'm getting clobbered here. What you come here, honey. And here's Mildred. Mildred wants to play. I know. You want to get down, and so I'll let you down. She hates being picked up, but she's become much better at it. So here you are. Go on your thing here. There you go. And you must have like a toy somewhere. Well, I can't do that now. Anyway, so we're talking about Daphnis and Chloé, right? Yeah. There are three reference recordings. Sometimes there's more than one, and it's impossible to choose between them. But these appeared in chronological order, and you'll understand sort of how they got a little bit twisted. The first was this one. This is Charles Munch and the Boston Symphony, recorded in glorious stereo, very early in the days of stereo. It was 1955, I think? Was this first one? Yes, 1955. And this is the one that RCA started flogging on CD, remastered in the Living Stereo SACD series and all of that, 3 tracks and 2 tracks and multi-tracks or whatever they did. This was the one that they were pushing because it was the first one. And it was out of print for a long time. And it was legendary. I mean, it had legendary status. Although this particular reissue came out in 1991, so it's been around. It's been kicking around, and it's marvelous. It was a new standard, frankly, in virtuosity and performance of the complete work, especially since it's a complete work with the choir and all that stuff. But it was also a new standard in sound, and sound matters when you're coming up with reference recordings, particularly when you're talking about Ravel. And you're talking about these pieces, which are just the most gorgeously glittering things in the world. I mean, this, you can imagine, was just an amazing sonic blockbuster when it first came out. And so it remains. It's beautifully recorded and beautifully performed. However, in 1961, at the end of his tenure in Boston, Munch remade it. An even better sound with even better playing. It's just as gorgeous. It's a little bit different in terms of performance. It's a little bit less eruptive in the final bacchanal. I love it. I like the steady tempo in the bacchanal. Some people may have preferred this one, but this became the standard. And I had this on RCA Gold Seal as a budget LP, and it was my first Daphnis. So I got lucky, because my first Daphnis happened to be the reference Daphnis. So it was a Munch recording, one of these. It was one of these, no matter what, was a reference recording for Daphnis and Chloé. However, in between these, I need a third hand. In between these came Pierre Monteux. There we go. See, that's how it came out. Pierre Monteux, whoa, and the London Symphony. Now, Pierre Monteux, this was 1959 on Decca. Pierre Monteux conducted the premiere. I mean, he did the premiere. Yeah, it always amazes me when we see these period instrument wahoos running around talking about how this music really sounded back in the day, when the people who actually played it and who knew the composers and who were there and who lived to make stereo recordings are there to tell us how it really sounded back in the day, or what the acceptable parameters of idiomatic performance are, thus rendering everything these hip people are doing absolutely completely worthless and useless in terms of its scholarly authenticity. I mean, if they do great performances, good. Let them do great performances using, instruments that were very marginally different from modern instruments today. Anyway, that's not the point. The point is we have Monteux, who in 1959 recorded a stereo, beautifully played London Symphony Orchestra, Daphnis and Chloé. And that became a reference all by itself. Of course, it has that pedigree. I mean, it's got the provenance. How could you, and Monteux was in fabulous shape in 1959. I mean, we all know that. He was marvelous. So you've got real Ravelian authority. But of course, Munch was around then too. I mean, he wasn't as old as Monteux, but he was, to the manner born when it came to this Ravel stuff. And he had the better orchestra. He really did, because the Boston Symphony was just, it was probably the great American orchestra in the 1950s and 60s, for much of it anyway. It was an entirely wonderful orchestral tradition, especially in French music. And so you've got 3 Daphnises now, all of which are potential reference recordings. There they are. And there's no need to choose between them. There really isn't. I mean, this one obviously got the British vote, I mean, for various reasons, and maybe in Europe or parts of Europe. And this one had the vote a lot of other places, including in France. So, to the extent that mattered. But I really think it's kind of fascinating to look at these pieces when sometimes there is no single choice. There isn't. And again, one of the things I love so much about doing this series is that we get to talk about the discographic history of the work. And that also makes it very, very special. There are also other wonderful Daphnises floating around there. There's Manuel Rosenthal's Daphnis and Chloé, which was not really known outside France, which is an absolutely stunning performance from about the same time as this stuff. So, it wasn't like these were the only ones, but they were the only ones who, as I said, they had to have a certain international distribution. They had to have been mentioned and talked about in the world press, to the extent we know what the world press was doing in those days. And so those are the Daphnises. And what's sort of fascinating is there have been marvelous, marvelous performances since. I mean, there really are glorious recordings. I mean, there was the Ozawa Boston one, which is as good as any. And there was the Dutoit, which everyone wanted to be the reference. The new digital recording was their first recording in Montreal, and it was on Decca, and they screamed and yelled and carried on and made as much of a fuss about that one supplanting these as the reference recording. Of course, it didn't. It didn't, because once something's a reference recording, it's sort of always a reference recording. There are moments when they do get supplanted. They do, and we've talked about some of those, and we'll talk about others. But basically, the best that can happen is you can add Dutoit, if you really love it, to this series, but there's no need. The traditional reference recordings, the ones that we all grew up with, the ones that are still acknowledged as the recordings of choice. And it's really funny when the the Munch 55 was reissued in that living stereo packaging. I have that one over here somewhere too. I don't know. It's, like the SACD thingy with the layers and all that stuff. Everyone immediately reverted to form. Oh yeah, that's the reference recording. There it is, the great classic Charles Munch. Well, there you go. So people have long memories, and some of us were around back in the day when these things were issued. I mean, when the second Dutoit came out, I was, 2 days old or something like that. I was just born. But I grew up with these. I grew up with these as I learned the work, and then I acquired other ones. And that's sort of the way it works. You start out with a reference, if you could do your research, look it up and see what's around, and then you get to know the work, and then you acquire other versions, and hopefully keeping it open mind. I do see in the comments very regularly people saying, well, this was the first one I heard and everything else is unsatisfying to me. Frankly, if that's your position, I pity you, because you're missing out on one of the all-time great aspects of being a classical music collector, which is learning what the expressive parameters of a piece of music are, and learning that they're never limited to just one version or the first one you've heard. You have to open yourself. But when it comes to choosing the reference recording, we're obviously working on an objective plateau here. We're talking about absolute historical fact. And the absolute historical fact is that Monteux or Munch are the references in Ravel's Daphnis et Chloé. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks so much for joining me. Take care.